Good morning and welcome to this, the first event of a Euractiv Giga Europe Digital Debate Series. I'm Brian Maguire. Today we address trust in a digital decade, making sure technology serves EU citizens. You can follow the discussion at hashtag EA Debates. Please tweet your comments using the hashtag and our social media team will respond to there. To ask questions, go to the chat section and use the Ask button. In March, the European Commission presented a vision for Europe's digital transformation by 2030. It focused on 4 key points: skills, government, infrastructure and business. A framework of digital principles to help promote and uphold EU values in the digital space. At the heart of this is a secure and trusted online environment. For connectivity providers, trust is defined as a secure connection which is linked to cybersecurity, and a private connection which builds confidence about the transparent and trustworthy use of our data, and a resilient, future-proof and high-quality connection which ensures good gigabyte speeds, including in rural areas. Digitalization of Europe's services and value chains over the next 6 years could boost Europe's GDP per capita by 7.2%, equivalent to a €1 trillion increase in overall GDP. To discuss this and other issues, we have with us today our keynote speaker, Margaret Vestager, Executive Vice President of the European Commission, with responsibility for a Europe fit for the digital age. Good morning, Commissioner. We need, I think, unmute you. 1 second.
Yes,
okay.
I
we
think
can
I
hear you
can
clearly
hear myself. At least I tried.
Good morning. The floor is all yours.
Do you hear me
good
well
to see
now?
you. Perfectly.
Well, it's very good to be here, and thank you for this, I think, very good introduction.
You're welcome. Great to see you again. I think we did one other event last week as well on artificial intelligence, and now we're on to connectivity. The floor is all yours, Commissioner.
Well, thank you very much. And I would like to start by taking us all back to 2001, because back then, on the 7th of September, it was a really special situation for the entire medical sector, because it was the first ever long-distance robotic surgery that was being performed, known as Operation Lindbergh, since it was a doctor in downtown New York operating a 68-year-old woman 6,000 kilometers away. That was in Strasbourg. And that was a success. It took 45 minutes and it worked. And obviously, it paved the way for enormous improvements and developments in robotic surgery. And this could only happen because of high-speed connectivity and precision robotics. But more than anything else, it could only happen because of full, unquestioned trust that the doctor and his patient put into this technology. Now, 20 years later, robot-assisted surgery has largely developed, but the question of how much we trust technology remains relevant. And Europeans' trust in technology is quite low. A recent Eurobarometer survey showed that only 25% of Europeans would trust a ride in a self-driving car. This, of course, could be anecdotal if it wasn't hiding a serious problem. The development of digital technology holds the key to a large degree of our prosperity and competitiveness. But not much will happen if we do not trust the technology. And this is why our European approach to digitization puts people first. There is a common thread to everything we do. No matter how fast technology evolves, well, they must always serve a human purpose with no one left behind. There are 4 things that we must have if we want to create that kind of trust. First, the knowledge as to how technology works. Second, the skills to make it work. Thirdly, solid and reliable infrastructure, and a free and safe online environment where we can control what we share about ourselves. too often when it comes to digital, information is actually hard to get. We see platforms as black boxes, as sophisticated algorithms. And these sophisticated algorithms, they get to choose what we see of the world that we live in, or maybe rather what we don't see. To gain control over digital technologies, we must first understand them. To do this, our Digital Services Act requires platforms to tell us how their algorithm works. Not to reveal them entirely, but to make it clear how their recommender system selects the content that we see. So in doing that, we can have a better idea as to why we're influenced and how we're influenced. And then, of course, decide if we want to trust this or not. Same applies to our proposal on high-risk application of artificial intelligence. When AI system entails risk to our fundamental rights or physical safety, we are entitled to a good explanation as to how these systems work. What data they have been trained with, how reliable and robust the outcomes are, and what they are being used for. We don't accept mass surveillance in our society, and we do not accept either the systematic use of remote biometric identification or any subliminal technique that would make us do something that we don't want to do. Together with knowledge about how the technology works, we need the skills to make them work. In fact, who among us would trust anything if we had no idea how it worked? And this is why our skills agenda sets out the goal that 17% of Europeans would have basic digital skills by 2025. It will be for every member state to make sure that the high school students of today can become the ICT specialist of tomorrow. And by 2030, we need a lot of them. The third condition that we need to fulfill if we want to create trust in digital technologies is the ability or availability of solid and reliable digital infrastructure. As in the example of the Lindbergh operation, we must feel confident that the connectivity will not let us down, that we will have access to high-speed internet no matter where we are in the European Union. I think those months of the pandemic made us all see that this is not just a technical matter. It is a matter of social inclusion. Are you part of what is ongoing, or are you not? And this is why the implementation of the EU's 5G securities toolbox is both essential and urgent. By 2030, we want all European households covered by gigabit connectivity. Hand in hand with connectivity, there is cybersecurity. The more connected that we become, the more concerned we are about the safety of what we do online, especially, of course, when things are sensitive. Online operation is obviously one, banking could be another one. Any failure of the system and our trust sort of shifts away, disappears, it's gone. The European cybersecurity strategy sets out a series of initiatives to increase cybersecurity in Europe, supported by the greatest amount of EU funding ever. That could amount to 2 billion euros overall, in addition to member states and industry investment. Together, knowledge, skills, infrastructure creates a strong foundation of trust. But that's not enough. On the other side of that bargain, platforms must always also play their part. They must contribute to a safe online environment for all users of digital roles. And to make sure that this happens, we have tabled a set of initiatives that all together design the online space as we want it to look, safe and free. A safe online environment starts with being able to trust what we do online. Trust the news that we read without having to fear that we fall upon terrorist propaganda. Trust that the toy that we buy online is as safe as the toy that we buy in the shop just around the corner. This is precisely the purpose of the Digital Services Act that I have mentioned already once. It defines a list of obligations that platforms must meet in order to protect us from illegal and harmful content without ever jeopardizing the freedom of speech. For instance, platforms will have to remove illegal content, but in parallel, explain to the user why the content was removed and give him or her a chance to complain. Online marketplaces will have to check their seller's identity before they are allowed to use the platform, in order, of course, to make life so much harder for dodgy traders. Finally, no online journey will be safe without our data being safe. The more we advance our digital transition, the more data we produce, the more control we need over these data. Europe's data protection law are already among the toughest in the world. In addition, we put data protection obligations in every proposal that we table. It is even one of the main goals of our recent proposals of a European digital identity. It puts all of us in full control of our personal data, since only we decide how much information is stored, how much is shared with our electronic ID. We want transparency, and we want citizen control. That is part of the basic principles upon which every regulation, every piece of legislation must build. Those are important points of the new digital declaration of digital principles, an instrument for us to promote, to uphold European values in digital space, along with others like freedom of speech, universal access to high quality connectivity, and to digital education. Back in 2001, Dr. Jacques Moresco in New York had more than just the technical means to achieve what would become the world's first long-distance remote surgery. He and his patient had the confidence that it could work, because three things were there to make it work: a safe environment, reliable performance infrastructure, and a positive human purpose. Three conditions that at the core of our trust in the digital decade. Thank you very much.
Commissioner, thank you. A positive human purpose also took away transparency with citizens' control, and you began with full, unquestioned trust as well as the starting point for how we move forward with this. Just, I know you want to stay with us for just a moment or two. We have three quick questions from some of our panelists who will introduce a bit more fully later on. But let me invite Manuel Constam. He's the Giga Europe co-chairman. He's also Senior Vice President and Chief Corporate Affairs Officer at Liberty Global. Manuel, good morning.
Good morning, Brian, and good morning Madam Commissioner, thank you very much for that very thoughtful analysis of the state of our digital society and your policy objectives for the coming years. So this year's worldwide pandemic has completely shifted the way we think about working from home, or social interactions, and the importance of access to our digital world in a crisis. And witnessing this unprecedented dependency on information technology and high-speed networks, we've all come to learn how our personal lives, societies, and economies kind of hyper-connected and interlinked. But we're also increasingly confronted with the vulnerability of this new reality when it comes to ethics, cybersecurity, and privacy. Now, we, as a company, we're very much aware of these dependencies and aim to ensure that our gigabit connections are fully reliable and secure while ensuring a maximum trust in digital services. But my question to you would be, what do you see as the EU's main challenges in accelerating trusted access to artificial intelligence and big data-driven services? And what can companies such as ourselves in the connectivity industry do to support your policy objectives towards higher levels of trust in the digital transformation?
I really appreciate how you put this sort of the balances, because working with enforcement and legislation, very often one gets to focus on what needs to be regulated and not all the many things that can be embraced, because there are so many things where we can improve society by the full use of digital technologies, and of course the life of each and every one of us. I think the most important thing is to make people see that they do have control over their data, to enable that. Because I think now a lot of people know that they have the rights to private life, they have a right for their data to be protected. But I think a lot of people find that it's a bit of a fiction, because they don't really know how to do this. And I think the more one can enable people to feel in control, the more trust will be built. And I also hope that that every business will take part in our educational mission, because I think it's very often so much more encouraging to start one's educational life being a trainee or doing a part-time in a business, to learn on the job, and then to get also the more sort of theoretical skills at school, at university, but that industry, that businesses take part in this educational endeavor. So I think those were the absolute sort of top of mind issues in order to be co-creators of trust.
Thank you. Our next question is from Joachim Reiter. He's also Giga Europe co-chairman, but Chief Corporate Affairs Officer and Executive Committee member of Vodafone Group. Joachim, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Commissioner. What I really like about, and I want to start with the praise of the Commission, what I really like about what Margaret and the Commission at large has outlined is an agenda of trust that combines protection with empowerment. And if you look at the four parameters that the Commissioner talks about, the empowerment element is a very essential one of it. So essentially empowering members of society to be productive and be able to trust the digital society that we're all creating. And I think that resonates quite well with the private sector at large. Now, the question from the industry that Manuel and I come from is, we do, as you know, we always do gap analysis. And one of the things that in terms of the high level of ambition and Commission has set out, there will be huge gaps that we need to overcome. Of course, on the digital skills is a clear one, but the other one is on the connectivity. And of course, one of the things that I would like to hear from the Commissioner a little bit more is, what's the tools, the levers that the Commission would like to pull to drive together with member states and with industry, that we can overcome the quite significant investment gap that we're faced with in order to achieve universal access to internet, which we're far from, and we will struggle under the current conditions quite significantly to achieve.
Yeah, Your point is obvious because it's the thing we need to do together in order to reach our defined target of all households being connected. One thing that we want to balance is to make sure that where there is a business case for connectivity, it is for businesses to establish it. Where there is no business case, then other citizens in the role as taxpayers should be able to come in and support the construction or the enabling of connectivity. Right now, we are in the process of looking into our broadband guidelines to make sure that they are sufficiently flexible to support this use. The second thing is that we encourage member states to do what we call sort of beauty contests when it comes to the frequencies that is needed, for instance, for 5G. So to ask about who can provide us with the broadest connectivity in the fastest possible way, and then leave the funding in the companies. Here we have not been really successful, I think, because it's kind of muscle memory in most government, how much funding have been coming in over the years from these kind of auctions. But it's still a possibility to go that way, to say it's the functionalities of our auctions that is of the essence rather than the funding coming from the businesses. And thirdly, we see in most recovery and resilience plans, member states makes it a priority to support connectivity. As you will know, 20% of the amount for each member state will have to go to digital investment, and here connectivity will definitely play a role in many countries.
Commissioner, and just one final question before you leave us is David Stevens. He's the president of the Belgian Data Protection Authority. Good morning, David.
Good morning. Thank you, Ms. Commissioner, for your introduction. I wouldn't want to say that you were not right on transparency and user control and even empowerment as it was translated later on. I think also for regulators, as we are in data protection, that's the challenge we have to live up to, that is protecting citizens and nevertheless are trying to do that in a way which doesn't undermine their trust. Let me give you one example where it might become tricky. If you want to launch as a member state, not us of course, but as a member state, a Corona app or a Corona certificate and things like that, there is traditional command and control data protection regulation, and there is this objective where it relates to public health and so on and so on. So one of the instruments which I think are important to close the gap between the general principles of GDPR on the one side and on the application of those principles in really very practical and concrete cases is codes of conduct. As you might know, the Belgian Data Protection Authority some weeks ago approved the first transnational code of conduct for data protection related to cloud services. And I myself am a strong believer in that instrument because it's how should I say, almost a negotiated process with industry, where we as mature adults try to decide on how these general data protection rules need to be applied in practical cases. So this kind of new co-regulatory regimes, is this something which is coming more in the future or in the view of the Commissioner? That's the first question. And the second one is, I truly believe if I look at
let's take one question at a time, yeah. David. Thank you. Let's put this to the Commissioner first.
Data Digital Services Act, networks of regulators is the question. The next question.
The GDPR, sort of our digital citizens' right, is with Vera Jourova and Didier Reinders. So they will know 1,000 times more than I would do about it. But for me, what you are suggesting and what you're doing is the way to go. Because for many businesses, I think it's still a challenge. For smaller businesses, it's still a thing that they think that they sort of have to overcome to respect people's privacy, and that's really a pity, because protecting privacy, empowering people, could be one of the drivers of digitization. One of the things that makes us confident and certain that this is for us, this is something that we want to do. So I think that these different sort of codes of conduct is indeed a way to go. And of course, I hope that you share them in the network of authorities and also with the European Data Protection Board, so that we get a more and more uniform application all over Europe, because I think that has been, and to some degree still is, one of the concerns of businesses, that their competitors do not necessarily have to or do implement it the right way. And I think that kind of networks, as you have, and as I have experienced firsthand with the European network of national competition authorities, working with the European authority, that's the way to go, because it is low on protocol and high on substance, which means that such network can be really, really useful for the citizens that we serve.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us this morning. Great to see you again. I wish you a good day today.
Likewise. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Take care. Now let's bring in the rest of our panel also this morning. We have from the European Commission, Lorena Alonso. She's the Director of Digital Society, Trust and Cybersecurity at DG Connect, the European Commission. We also have with us Brando Benefei, a member of the European Parliament, a member of the IDA committee in the Parliament. David Stevens, we have already heard from. Manuel Constam, we heard from as well. And Joachim Reiter is also with us as well. Joachim, I know you can't stay too long with us, so I want to come to you first this morning. But let's hear the opening remarks just from each of our speakers first today. So Lorena, your elevator pitch.
Thank you, Brian. Well, Vice President said it all. Trust is of the essence, and there are a number of elements that are necessary to build trust. Let me talk about the tools that we use normally to build this trust. And in Europe, we are very well known for our regulations. We are good at regulating, and I think we should be proud, but that's not the only tool we are using. A very important tool to build trust is the technology itself, so that if we are at the forefront of the new technological change or the new technological solution, and we build it already secure, then we are going to build trust. So let me give you 3 examples of where we are combining these type of tools. Cybersecurity, as mentioned by the Vice President. Yes, we are reinforcing the regulatory environment, but we are also pushing technology to artificial intelligence to detect cyber attacks earlier, building our resilience. Another example, David was talking about it, the digital COVID certificate. It is a piece of legislation with the rules of the game, but we have built the solution from the outset with a digital signature to avoid cyber attacks, and with a digital gateway where there is no transfer of personal data. The technological solution is secure. And the last example, Vice President said it, the new proposal on the digital identity. It is a piece of legislation, but the technological solution being proposed, it's having the citizen in control of the data and in a very cyber secure way. So these are the 2 tools we are working with to build trust. Thank you.
Lorena, thank you. Brando Benefei. Good morning, Brando.
Hi. Hi. Well, I would say that I feel very much on the same note of the previous speaker, in the sense that we cannot reach the digital compass communication goals set by the Commission without the trust of our citizens. The pandemic, for example, has seen an exponential increase of digitalization for obvious reasons, but with it came an exponential increase in consumer scams, disinformation, cyber attacks, I've been dealing with this. Now I deal with AI. I'm also been nominated rapporteur for the new regulation of the parliament, but I've been working on the consumer rights in the digital environment, and we've seen this increase of problems and also an evidence of digital divide and of lack of digital literacy. All these things together, they undermine citizens' trust and raise fears in new technologies that influence the public debate and also the policymakers. So a successful digital transition like the one we are aiming for cannot happen if citizens are not behind it. And as a policymaker, I have this very, very clear in my mind.
In just a few moments. David Stevens, quick remarks.
Yes, thank you. Let me start with a personal note. I think around 10 years ago, I was the chairman of an advisory committee in the media sector. And back then, journalists came to me and said, David, something really dramatic is happening. More and more information, or also relevant information journalistically, is being spread online, and we don't have the tools to do anything about it, and everybody's becoming a journalist. And I said to them back then, well, I think that's a challenge, because the more information is coming online, the more the filtering and the processing and the triage, I would say, by journalists will be relevant. I think the same is true if you look at the internet, the digital life of tomorrow, the objective to build digital trust. Lives are becoming more and more complex. Regulation is becoming more and more complex. And I think the key is in guiding and in keeping it simple, or trying to make it simple and understandable for users. Because if we want to empower the users with their rights, for example, data protection, but also others, they at least need to understand and be able to cope with them. And if that means for every web page I'm visiting, clicking away an ugly banner or an unattractive text, reading an unattractive text, that's probably not the best user experience. So my plea is very much for, let's try. I know life is simple. I know life is complex, sorry. I know regulation is often also very complex because it's, if you want, a mirror of our lives. But let's try, as all stakeholders, to keep it as simple and as understandable for users. Because if we're talking about user empowerment, that's what we need to do. And again, as an authority, we try to do that. We see, of course, we implement enforcement cases and impose actions or sanctions to controllers that don't abide by the data protection rules. But we also try to inform users, and we also try to establish new regulatory approaches like the codes of conduct I mentioned before. This is all from the point of view of making live regulation understandable for maybe both data controllers, because the commissioner also said that small and medium enterprises might be challenging for them, but also for users and also for data controllers. So simplicity is my magic word, even though the life is becoming more and more complex.
Thank you so much. Manuel Constam.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, we've been investing in our own networks to create these European fixed mobile convergence champions that are fit to meet these ever-increasing connectivity demands for our customers. In particular, as we think to pick up our lives post the pandemic. And during the pandemic, we saw an incredible kind of increase in the usage of these networks, and in a massive use of stream time, of course, but also in a way, we feel that a lot of people have been using these networks more than ever before, but very often not so much aware of the risks and vulnerabilities. And I think trust is something that it needs to be built, but it also needs to be, people need to be aware of the dangers that are out there, and they have not been so far too often. We've been engaging with the Commission a lot at the start of the pandemic and with national governments, and we've had some very useful exchanges already on the need to mitigate risks online. particularly when it came to network management, when the whole world population started to log on to video services in one go. And that has done, and actually that cooperation has worked pretty well. We also see, there's more openings for doubt when people get engaged digitally. One example is the misinformation spreading around 5G. And together with our peers in the telecom sector, we're working hard to combat these kind of false claims on 5G, because it's an essential technology for the future. So we welcome the Commission's goal to encourage these trustworthy technologies and the newly proposed AI regulation. And we also understand we have a role to play. Access to seamless connectivity across Europe is essential. And as Joachim said, there is still an investment gap, but the industry is working hard to make it happen. I would leave it there for the moment. Brian, thanks.
Thank you, Manuel. Okay, Joachim Reiter, your quick remarks.
All right, thanks a lot, and my colleagues have said a lot, and it's a surprising degree of uniformity of views, if I can put it like that. So let me throw a little bit of tension into it to help you, Brian, with your debate. I think we all agree that trust is going to be essential for also the level of adoption of Europe of digital technologies, which will drive our competitiveness. So all of us have an interest, no matter whether you're corporate sector, citizens, SMEs, or if you represent government. If you think about the two pillars, protection and empowerment, Europe is already today, if you want, a global superpower on rulemaking, international standard setting. And GDPR is a great example of that, and Europe will for sure continue in that space. I think what I'm calling for is a bit more granular understanding on how do we crack the problems with empowerment and that, for me, much to Manuel's point, comes much deeper. It's not a command and control that David referred to. It's a multi-stakeholder dialogue, standing shoulder to shoulder to really ensure that all citizens can become as empowered as possible in the digital society that we create. For a company like Vodafone, we, for example, have formulated that in the form of a social contract that we want to engage with all governments and regulators on, which is built around three principles: trust, including on products and services, cyber, privacy. It is built on fairness, including how do we overcome the digital gaps and leaving no one behind. And it's built on, thirdly, leadership, tackling the fact that SMEs are far less connected than large companies and therefore have struggled through this last pandemic much more than large companies have done on average. But similarly in that space, skills and making sure that digital is a subservient of our green transition that we all strive for. So I think we do need to dig deeper into the empowerment, be a little bit more clear around why have Europe failed to empower its citizens sufficiently to date, and how can we jointly, industry and governments and civil society, break through at a different level going forward.
Excellent, thank you. We'll discuss that in more detail in a few moments as well. Joachim, I know you don't have a lot of time, so I just want to spend a few minutes with you and then let you go. But you spoke about the role operators can play in building trust with Europeans. They need a secure, reliable connectivity. That's got to be a starting point as well. But there are obstacles for you in delivering this as well, deploying more high-speed networks across the continent, particularly in rural areas as well, where the digital divide is clearly wider. For you, what are the obstacles and how do we overcome these, Joachim? Kanti, I think you're muted. Can you unmute again?
Yeah.
There we go. Thank you.
Yes. So the Commissioner was very kind to give us a bit of an outline of the key parameters. I think the challenge that Manuel, myself, and other companies are struggling with is all of us would like to bridge the urban-rural divide that we have across Europe. The challenge we have is that economically, under the current circumstances, Europe hasn't figured out the magic formula to make it viable to deploy high connectivity to all citizens, no matter where they live, which is a legitimate demand by all societies. So what the Commission referred to, if I just take a step back, the reality is that only 40% of households today, or 40% of households today still in Europe don't have access to high capacity networks, which is frankly not good enough post-COVID, when we have understood that connectivity is a lifeline for all families and all sectors. Now, one of the things that we have been looking at is then whether the EU Reconstruction Fund, and the Commission referred to the RRF national plans, whether it's adequately trying to close the investment gap that Europe has been running over multiple years. And unfortunately, we're releasing a report today with Deloitte, which points out that the national reconstruction plans are inadequate to seriously close the gap. And in actual fact, connectivity is probably the least prioritized by member states on average, the least prioritized sector, part of the connectivity that, or part of the digital transformation that member states put their money to. So we are stuck with a situation where not enough public money is going into it under the EU reconstruction funds. We have a private investment gap because of the health of the sector that we need to overcome in Europe. And rightly, the Commissioner pointed out that the Commission has struggled to convince member states to change some of the policy requirements on the sector so as to crowd in more private investment. My own view is that there needs to be a little bit of a reset. We need to come together and sit and discuss what are the real drivers of this large and growing investment gap in Europe that we are now not going to solve through the EU reconstruction funds. I think we are absolutely going to have to think about how do we avoid duplicative spend, and that's where you have things like network sharing coming in. You have to look at digital deployment, easing of digital deployment. I mean, basically there's a lot of red tape that basically drives up the cost and delays rollout in Europe of connectivity. And then finally, on spectrum, the Commission referred to beauty contest. She's absolutely right. Unfortunately, member states are not going down that route. I think from a company like Vodafone, we think there is a quite simple solution out there, which is every single member state can, under the existing spectrum rules, just extend the period by which the licenses are valid. So if you have in Europe today 15-year license compared to China or US where it's perpetual, well, we suggest that member states extend at least 10 more years for the existing spectrum, and that would automatically allow that operators to invest much more because our balance sheets are automatically improving by such a measure. But fundamentally, I think we're struggling with the lack of awareness how serious the problem is, and a lack of willingness to come together to really wrestle to the ground, both on the public side and on the private side. What are the things we need to do to unlock public and private investment so that no European citizen is left behind?
Thank you. Joachim, it's a rare day in Brussels when you don't mention green with digital. So let me bring that in and add another word, China, to that too. Without the digital investments, it's nearly impossible, perhaps impossible, to achieve the green agenda as well. And so if we look simply at smart cities, for example, we can't get the energy efficiencies, we can't get the carbon reduction in cities without 5G connectivity, without the smart interaction of cars and the infrastructures needed with that. Why do you think national governments have not understood this critical investment at this critical moment? Joachim?
No, I think we are. I mean, part of it is that we have not captured the imagination, neither as an industry nor as policymakers, perhaps, of how essential digital is as a subservient of the green transition. You refer to smart cities, but if you look at something as, it sounds technical, but IoT, which is basically the deployment of sensors in all our energy or water distribution system, that allows us an enormous saving of the planetary impact of our current economic systems that are, frankly, from a sustainability point of view, not viable. So we all know that we're going to have to modernize the way that we have organized society in quite a dramatic way. And digital can be an incredible lever to achieve that. So, for example, in the case of Vodafone, we sat down and we have now moved to 100% renewable for our own European footprint and how we run our networks. But when we looked at our carbon enablement, until 2030, through IoT alone and the way that we work with our customers, we will be able to save the equivalent of Italy's annual emissions. And so there is a point around we need to capture that imagination. I think it's starting to come real in an itemized way. But the problem is that when you're talking about a fundamental transformation of society, you need the government to have a vision of how do you redefine a city? How do you spread the nodes of growth? How do you redefine your energy and water systems, for example, your waste garbage systems, whatever it may be? And that requires us as companies are very good at selling individual product lines, but we're not good at devising a command system, if you.
Okay, I'm going to come to Brando Benefei in just a moment to talk about the big vision thing that's needed here. So, but just in terms of how we fund Europe's recovery, Joachim, because I was speaking with Günther Oettinger, the former commissioner, last week about this as well. And he said, look, you need to be able to finance Europe, and a lot of it's to do with the trust that we have and our competitiveness. And if we're not competitive, we're not supporting our SMEs as well, then there's not going to be trust in the markets to sustain this recovery. So, from your perspective, if we're going to go green and digital all the way through here, what do you need to sell as the vision thing? What's going to be the key narrative that builds the confidence in our competitive capacity and citizens understand as well? How would you pitch it?
I would this is not about green and digital transition as end goals. Both of them, Lorena referred to that, both of them are means to an end about what does it mean to be a citizen of Europe. I don't know about you guys, but I live in a big city. COVID was horrific, but one of the things I really enjoyed was listening to birds, having good air quality, actually not being disturbed by cars all the time, not being worried about my kids playing on the street and being hit by a car. There is quite significant opportunities for citizens, but you have to bring it back to the question around in what way does it improve citizens' quality of life, their well-being. And I think all of us have to sort of take our big transition vision and translate it into improvements in people's lives. That's ultimately what matters. And I think Lorena and the Commissioner did refer to that.
Thank you. Joachim, thanks for your time today. I know you're under pressure, as is Brando, so I'm going to come to Brando right now as well. Brando, you talked about the different ranges of issues that you're dealing with, including disinformation, consumer rights, digital divide, digital skills. And you mentioned at the very beginning about scams as well. So this element of trust has been constantly undermined, and yet, we just spoken about the need for the big vision to gain the commitment and the understanding and the confidence of Europe's citizens. What do we need to do to build this trust, Brando?
Well, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, perfectly.
Yeah. Okay. So in my view, I have to say that the Commission and Vice President Vestager, also that we just heard from, has put trust as a pivotal concept in all the ambitious plans for years to come. I mentioned earlier in my first introductory remarks the digital compass, but also this will be crucial for the AI, but also for the DSA when we look at how we can empower our users in all their activities online. I think this. I mean, it's crucial that we combine the legislative actions with the digital literacy and the support for learning about how the digital environment works. I mean, for example, on the issue of consumers that I mentioned earlier, it's very important that they are informed, because otherwise they will just not be able to profit also of existing guarantees. It's really important to talk also about this concept and this issue of trust in the digital age, also during the conference on the future of Europe. I mention it because it was launched with the first plenary just last week, a few days ago. I was also there, and one of the working groups of the conference that will involve many citizens from all over Europe, together with the institutions, local, national, European, will be on the digital issues. So it will be important to work there too.
Brando, let me ask you just, do you think, Brando, do you think we worry too much about educating citizens? Is this not something more organic in terms of you provide great products, great services, and there will be greater uptake, and the market will flow more naturally that way, rather than a centrist-driven education process which people probably won't trust anyway? Brando?
I think it's a good point, but I think we need a blend of this, because also I see that my nephews, they are digital natives, like I'm not, even though I've always used the computer since a early age, but they are real digital natives, but sometimes they don't have the full understanding, for example, on what happens with the data. And as they give data, since they are really children, they should be able to understand what is all about, and all the privacy issues, and how to use things in a better way. So in my view, yes, it's about products, about organic context, but I believe that we also need some basic education. That is not the same in the member states. In the EU, there are differences. And I have to say that this concept will be crucial also for the artificial intelligence. I mean, Commissioner Vestager mentioned earlier already some of the most problematic issues that we will have to deal with. That is the issues of surveillance and of biometric recognition. That will be a huge topic of debate in the exchange that we will have between Parliament, Council, and Commission on how we can make this proposal better. But I think that.
Let me put this to Lorena as well. Lorena, you deal particularly with cybersecurity. If we're dealing with resilience here, we've seen failures in our health system because of lack of preparedness and lack of resilience, and the same will translate into the digital sector, whether it's a cyber attack or simply a large system failure, which is not impossible. How do we prepare to get this buy-in from European citizens to gain trust by proving that as a union we are better together, we're more resilient together, and the systems and services are there for our digital welfare? Lorena.
Thank you, Brian. Well, there are several angles to deal with here. First of all, and you mentioned attacks even to the health system. And here comes something which is at the essence of how to trust our own systems. Very often, and it's the case in the health system, and it's understandable, when you are the manager of an institution, whether public or private, for example, if it's health and you have the choice where to put my money, first reaction is going to be, well, in saving lives. I mean, cybersecurity things will come later, because my first mandate is saving lives. But there's not yet this second thought that investing in cybersecurity is saving lives, because today cyber attacks are no longer something that happens in the cyber world. They have consequences in real life, whether it's health, when a hospital is attacked, or whether it's pipelines where suddenly people cannot go and fill their cars. So, and I will not mention other more possible dramatic effects. So I think that we need to be prepared, because as for the pandemic, everybody knew that a pandemic would arrive at one point or another. There were so many predictions, and yet it arrived. And were we ready? So I think that here we need to also be ready for large-scale cyber attacks. And this is a mix of things. We need to build resilience, and resilience, you build it by investment, as I was saying. You build it by having a regulatory environment. For example, in the rules we are changing now, we are extending the scope of application. So there are now new sectors that before we didn't thought were critical, and now we see they are critical. Health was covered by, but for example, production of medical devices or labs were not covered. Now we are covering them. We are realizing digital is spreading everywhere. We need also, you were saying it before, this not trust in sharing information, it's impossible. Now, we need to share information, we need to cooperate. This is why we are building, for example, the Joint Cyber Unit, and we are working on networks. This sharing of information is crucial, and trust is of the essence. There will not be sharing of information if we don't trust each other. And to trust each other, we need to raise the level of cyber preparedness. And this is what we are trying to work with. And as I was saying before, using technology, because the hackers are becoming more and more smart. It is normal. They use technology to attack us better.
Okay.
We need to use technologies to defend us better.
Thank you. I'm going to come to Manuel in just a second. But Brando, I know you have to go 12, so just a quick word before you go as well. Lorena is talking about the awareness of cybersecurity and the resilience that's needed from that as well. Do you think that's the direction that we should go with education about, if you talk about algorithms, the complexity, looking inside the black box, most people are not going to get that. But teaching critical thinking to repel disinformation and teaching about the different dynamics of cybersecurity. Do you think that can be digested by citizens?
I think to some extent, yes, because we have learned about security in other contexts, but also technological ones that are not the digital ones. So in our everyday life. So I think we can do this. This is an important point to raise and to discuss. We must do it, and we must push for this also in terms of learning. But at the same time, the institutions should work to ensure the maximum level of security, of cybersecurity, of lack of risk as much as possible in terms of the using of applications. I get back to conclude on the AI, in fact, because there will be a debate on whether it will be okay or not. I had exchanges already with Commissioner Vestager that is more optimistic, we can say. Some of us are a bit less optimistic, that if we leave the developers of AI a full possibility to do a self-assessment of the categorization of high-risk applications for AI, and so to have a specific regulation that will be specific for high risk, we risk, sorry for the game of words, that there will be high-risk applications that we find out they are high risk only when the consequences and the damage is there. So we need to be more careful, more preemptive when we look at some kind of applications. And I think that it's important that people are educated and are able to deal with this, but we need to be sure that we don't let things go in a way that are creating risks without us able to, as regulators, to look at them before they get into everyday life of people and maybe create damages that will be difficult to amend. So we will need to work on this balance, on self-assessment of the risk by the developers and control ex ante and not only ex post by the institutions. This will be our work also with the Commission in the next months. Thank you.
Brando, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to be with us today. I'll speak to you soon. Take care. And
thank you.
Manuel, thank you. Manuel, you heard from Commissioner Vestager as well. She was saying that 25% of Europeans trust the idea of self-driving cars as well. There's a lot of work still to be done there, but do you think this is the problem here is one of lack of experience, and that as people begin to use these services, they begin to see them with real life ability, that this trust will simply grow? Manuel?
Partly yes, but partly let me also throw in a bit of a curveball here, Brian. I think yes, we need more trust, but we also need a significant increasing awareness of security matters. I think there was a very interesting article written by Yuval Harari in the Financial Times about a week ago, where he basically said the pandemic this year has been actually a triumph of mankind over the biggest biological crisis we've witnessed in a generation. In many ways, thanks to information technology, we've been able to keep our economies going with IT. We've been able to develop vaccines at breakneck records because of the IT connectivity of all of the big scientific laboratories in the world. But it has also made us incredibly dependent and vulnerable to future attacks on that infrastructure, be it through malware or cyber warfare. And that's something that we really need to be very, very mindful of. And I think a lot of ordinary citizens, but also public institutions, need to be a lot more aware of. I remember only a few years ago, the Dutch have this system of controlling their water levels throughout the country with sluice gates and locks everywhere. And it appeared that there was one single password that was necessary to open up all of the locks in the country with a single click of a button. So those kind of things we really need to be mindful of. And I think that requires as much attention as developing the trust itself.
Yeah, and part of this has got to be a civil response process as well. Not that you ever want to use it, like preparing with certain types of medicines, but it's there when it's needed. And very few European countries have this kind of response mechanism. Sweden, I think, is one which has advised all citizens they all get a handbook and simple things like how to aerate water as well in the bathtub. Latvia, for example, during the pandemic, they had a 72-hour response plan as well, where all citizens were required to be self-sufficient for at least 72 hours until the government was able to re-establish connections and communications across the country. Is this part of what it takes to build citizens' trust? Is that, we've got your back, but you've got to be reliant to a certain point. And yes, there will be problems, but yes, we can deal with them. Have we got to learn to speak this way to the whole continent, Manuel?
Yes, I think so. It's a shared responsibility between government, companies and ordinary citizens. A single citizen can be, unfortunately, in this world, responsible for launching a cyber attack because his or her computer is infected in a way that it spreads across the world. And so everybody has this shared responsibility. It needs to be an open debate. And everybody needs to be aware of what his or her role is going to be in that process. Okay. And companies have a big role to play there as well, obviously, and we do. We have 24/7 war rooms that are fighting these kind of attacks, but we can't do it alone.
Okay, David, simplicity. Back to your pet theme. We are dealing with 5G, which is still poorly understood by the average consumer, and yet offers a huge boost in terms of capacity and global competitiveness if we do it right for our economies. And then we have quantum, still another layer to be put in there too. How do we articulate simplicity to Europe's citizens and build trust with such a dynamic and complicated environment?
Thank you for that question. Interesting question. I would like to make a couple of comments on the debate going on, and actually the answer to the question is also baked into these comments. But first of all, I get a negative impression of this idea of trust is missing, and it's not fair because he left already, but I noted down Joachim spoke about failed empowerment. I wouldn't be so negative. In fact, at least from the data protection point of view, I think citizens are becoming more and more aware about their rights, about how to execute them. Does that mean that that all is well and nothing can be done? Of course not. There is so first comment, I wouldn't be so negative about empowerment or trust. I think there is a lot of trust, and we are doing things online which we wouldn't imagine doing online 5 or even 2 years ago, I think. So overall, the level of trust is quite okay, I think. Of course, there is work to be done, and it's not so black and white as there is no trust or there is trust. First comment. Second, there is work to be done, of course, and of course, there too, it's not black and white. Do we need to launch products and make sure that they're okay? or do we need to turn towards central education? There I liked particularly what Manuel was saying, that it's a shared responsibility of everybody, and that if we want to take further steps with regard to trust, we probably need to do it all together, because even an individual can undermine the trust for an entire system. Think about the water example that Manuel gave. And then finally, and that's a comment which I would like to support fully of Lorena, is if there is one, for me personally, if there is one thing what the COVID crisis has learned or showed, that is that we can no longer make a distinction between cyber, which would be in the beginning of the 90s was like a separate legal order and shouldn't be regulated. It was the free heaven of ideas and so on and so on. And that's completely gone, as all our lives are happening digital, and almost every aspect is supported by digital technology and even online. I think there is no distinction anymore, not at all, between what we call real life and online life or cyber or whatever. And of course, there is the issue of dependency. We depend every day, and that too we learned through the COVID crisis. Every day we depend more on digital technology. So now, if you could repeat your question, I think I could summarize the response to it.
You did a good job there. Okay, basically, the idea that we need to have a level of civil preparedness as well, to build on that simplicity. How do we articulate this simplicity when we have artificial intelligence, which is too complicated for most policymakers, never mind most citizens, and then we have quantum being layered on top of that, which is basically like adding steroids to the system as well. How do you engage citizens in a way which is tangible, digestible, and yet, as you emphasize, for good communications, it must be simple?
If I look, okay, thank you. If I look from the public side,
I'm just glad I
was
able to remember the question, actually.
Yeah. If I look from the public side, I think, I mean, there is an important role to play, and probably we need to make sure that we're supported in playing that role by technologies as well. But there is an important role to play to combat false simplification. For example, the 5G, or the relationship between 5G and the COVID vaccine and things like that, or 5G and others, where there is a lot of fake information. And I think as a public authority, and not me as a data protection authority, but the public authorities at large, if we could somehow try to or get rid of, which is probably impossible, or educate users that there is really information online, and it's not because it is online that it's true, then I think that would already be quite an important step. But then, of course, you can be optimistic about this. I think it's feasible to do that if we do it all together. But you can be pessimistic about it if even presidents or former presidents deny the global warming. Also, then I mean that indicates that we might have a serious problem in this area of fake news and fake simplicity. I would call it.
Thank you. I would love to talk more about critical thinking and teaching it in schools now. I need to take some questions as well. So Lorraine, a couple of questions for you first. So one is from Johannes and TS. This is for Commissioner Vestager, but you kind of work in the same building. So, dear Commissioner, do you plan to require the transparency of algorithms operating on the European markets? She touched on this a little bit. Can you give a bit more detail?
Well, that would be more for my colleague Lucy dealing with artificial intelligence. But as you know, we have come with a proposal on artificial intelligence where transparency is indeed a very important part of it. And as we were saying before, we are talking about empowering citizens. A way to empower citizens is by increasing their knowledge. How do you increase their knowledge? Increase their knowledge with transparency measures. So there are indeed in the proposal, there are a number of transparency measures in the field of algorithm as well. But indeed would pass that question to my colleague Lucy dealing with artificial intelligence. But indeed, I think that's
another question more specifically on security, so also from Johannes. How does the Commission propose to go about monitoring whether its rules on security and surveillance and abuse are respected?
Well, what we have done in the proposal on the NIS directive is to increase precisely enforcement powers. So one of the problems we had is that cyber authorities in many member states didn't have really the tools to enforce the rules, and for example, the level of fines were ridiculous in some member states. So this is one of the things we are dealing with, because at the end of the day, as we were saying before, this is all a shared responsibility between citizens, industry, and government. If we want to improve security, citizens are said by being empowered with transparency, with skills, which is key in the field of cybersecurity, being aware, and with empowering them with technology, as we were saying before. On the side of the government, to tell clearly that there are rules of the game, and that, as my commissioner often says, what is allowed offline should be allowed online, and what is not allowed offline should not be allowed offline should not be allowed online, so that there are also rules to be respected. And for the companies, I think that managers need to be more responsible. This is one of the things that we do in the new proposals on cybersecurity, to increase the level of responsibility of the managers. If you are a manager of a body and you know that your responsibility is at stake, you're going to pay more attention to the cybersecurity measures that are taken by your own company. So that's something that is very important. And also, of course, that products and services are by design already secure. So here is also for companies, but also for the new rules to come in place.
Thank you. Please send more questions in. We have others. I'm going to come to those in just a moment, more to do with the market structure, things like that. But please send us more questions, and we have a few, we have 15 minutes, so I'll send those now, and I'll bring those to the panel in just a moment or two. Manuel, I was speaking with Commissioner Vestager last week, and we were talking about the comparison between former wars, where the one with the biggest arsenal and the most best trained army would win, and democracy was won or lost that way. Today, on the digital side as well, cybersecurity, but also market power, competitiveness, is largely going to be driven by the digital side. Is this a winner-takes-all situation, and Europe really has to put the money on the table, ensure the infrastructure is developed, ensure that the security systems are better than our global competitors? Is this the moment of truth for Europe, Manuel?
Yes, but I wouldn't over dramatize it.
I'm a journalist. I'm permitted.
Yes. We thrive by hyperbole. Yeah, no, there's a lot to do, but let's not forget that we have already achieved a lot, right? I mean, and certainly there's certain parts of Europe which have achieved very, very high degrees of connectivity and of digitization, but there is still a lot more to do. What it means for your global competitiveness, I think. Honestly, this past year, and we'll see a lot of learnings coming through afterwards. But it has all kind of taught us a lot, right, about how quickly we can pivot and move online with all of the economies and services. The economies keep running, and Europe has done pretty well through that past year, thanks in large part to a pretty resilient kind of overall infrastructure, whether it's fixed or mobile. Governments can still do a lot to digitize further. I think companies, irrespective of their online connectivity, still required to digitize their processes and their back office and their whole customer care handling a lot more than what they do today. But in all of those, I think Europe today doesn't do that badly compared to the rest of the world.
Let me talk about standards then. Do you think our lack of ability to resolve standards issues, particularly to do with 5G, is going to hinder us quickly when we compare with the Chinese market, for even our automobile manufacturers? They know what they're doing in China. There's a standard there, and in Europe they can't plan for critical infrastructure because of the indecision when it comes to standards. Manuel?
Well, I would challenge it. I think, depends on what kind of standards you're talking about. But I think the multilateral structure of the European Union has forced European countries to create these global standards, or these European standards, which have become an export product, right? And I think Euractiv mentioned it earlier today, that there are a number of standards areas where Europe has led the way. And basically have defined the global system, and GDPR is one of those. When it comes to technology standards, of course, there are definitely standards wars. There have always been. Remember, VHS versus Betamax in the 1980s and 1970s. And that, in the space of electric cars, that's happening today. I know the Chinese are developing different kinds of electric cars with their own infrastructure. Not sure if they will travel worldwide, by the way. That's another issue. But you're right. There is always, in this technology space, there is a global competition for standards. But I don't see Europe running behind significantly there. We do need to catch up on our connectivity. We do need to catch up on digitization of our critical kind of business processes and uptake. But other than that, I think it's not a bad picture. What I am worried about is the vulnerability of the networks for international global attacks.
I'm just about to come on to that as well, and for data for David also. The US and EU are still trying to work out how we're going to talk to each other in civilized terms, and Privacy Shield died a death, and this is still something which, even despite the Biden administration's slightly softer approach, is unresolved. We talk a lot about China as being our competitor. The America, depending which administration, is viewed as passive or more aggressive. David, how do you see our alignment when it comes to data and what this means for trust for European citizens? Have we done a lot to protect, to encourage with GDPR? Do we risk undermining that with a weak agreement with the United States?
That's actually more a question for the European Commission, I would say, because it's the Commission.
I don't think the European Commission would comment, frankly.
Because it's the Commission who negotiates that kind of agreement. But no, jokingly aside, I think the way we deal with personal data is not exactly the same as the way we deal, or Americans deal with personal identifiable information. It's not exactly the same. And of course, that's the basic starting point. If you're not talking about the same definition of a basic concept like that, discussions always become difficult. One example, information which is shared online in Europe stays personal data and stays protected, and you cannot use it just because it's available online. That's not always the same in the United States. So I think the difficulty is trying to find common understanding about, levels of, not only the definition, but also levels of protection and types of protection, and that if we go to that kind of, how should I say, discussion, I think it will be easier to come to a compromise. Knowing that, of course, the accessibility of information for all kinds of state intelligence services will always be a difficult discussion, even if you're an ex-member of the European European Union. Sorry. So I mean, but I'm quite positive that we will find another compromise, or well, the Commission will find a compromise with America on a quite short notice. And in the meantime, I don't want to be the one saying that there is no problem, not at all. The level of protection at the sites of the United States need to be equivalent to what we have in the European Union. But I also don't think that it would be fair to now prohibit any kind of use of US-based technology. Let's put it that way. So I mean, again, this is actually a Commission question. When will we get a new deal?
That's, I'll put a softer angle on it for Lorena and give her a chance to actually answer it. Lorena, you know, the name Max Schrems sends chills through the Commission. This process is ongoing, and essentially it's about reciprocity as well, having European citizens' rights respected in the United States in the way that we would treat their rights as well. This goes to the core of what trust is, you know, a level playing field, a transparency of process, and when it comes to sort of data protection, a fair judicial process. You know, do you think that advocates like Max Schrems will continue to dominate the agenda, or will we fix these rules in a way which European citizens will really trust and will not? Well, as the Commissioner said earlier, it will be something of a full trust in the system. Do you think we're going to achieve that full trust, Lorena?
I'm an optimistic by nature. I think that why we are having this debate today is in great part due to the great speed of digitization. I think that what is happening in terms of lack of trust, cyber attacks, this is something that comes with digitization. I mean, the bad guys evolve at the same time as the good guys, let's say, and we need the time to set the rules and to build the empowerment of citizens, their skills, their knowledge, their awareness. And with COVID, things have gone very, very, very quickly. And I think this is why we are having all these debates. Oh my God, suddenly all this exploding. We are all dependent on digital, and we are maybe scared. So, but I believe that things will now settle, and we have maybe done a step which is much bigger than normally would have happened in such short period of time. But I believe that the right tools and mechanisms are being put in place, and I'm optimistic as Manuel that we are doing the right things at all fronts, whether it's in the misinformation field, it's in how we deal with artificial intelligence, how we deal with cyber. What happens is that the tools we are using, whether, as they were saying before, is education, is technology itself, it's regulation. Now we need to put them into practice at a much higher speed, okay. Including also transatlantic cooperation, and we are on it. We are discussing, as was seen last week with the visit of the President. I think that on all fronts we are working on it, and I am optimistic.
Thank you. We're going to come to closing remarks in just a second, but just to end what you were saying there, you know, we invest in certain types of our economy to make it advance, not just to protect it, but to make it advance. And you know, there are global actors, China, Russia, who have as part of their longer-term objective the destabilization of Europe, and they invest large amounts of money in this to achieve that objective. Europe doesn't invest a large amount of money in repelling that kind of disinformation, that kind of cyber attack. Is it really time that we invested substantially more and focused on this as a core element of not just the protection of our democracy, but also the protection of our future economy? Lorena, just a quick comment.
Yes, I fully agree, and this is what has happened. I think that with the new Commission, things have radically changed. since the day our President von der Leyen decided that digital would be a high priority, I can assure you the speed of work in my DG has multiplied in terms of tools that we are adopting, but also the level of investment. Huge. I mean, the fact that for RRF, it was decided that 20% should go to digital. This had not happened before. So I think that, yes, we need to highly increase the level of investment, not only to give the importance, because as I was saying before, if we are at the forefront of the new technological developments and solutions, we are ready from the outset, building the future in accordance to our principles and rules. And this is why industrial policy is of key importance. This is why Commissioner Breton is giving so important to it. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, 30 seconds, your wrap-up sound bites. David, you want to go first? So, trust in a digital decade, what needs to be done?
If you really want to build trust in the digital decade, if you really want your customer to trust you, I think you have to respect your customer, and well, simplicity comes around again. As Goethe said, in der Beschränkung zeigt sich der Meister. Also, simplicity.
Thank you so much. Manuel, 30 seconds.
I think, awareness is good, but we also need a culture of vigilance among companies and among citizens and government. We invest a lot in online training when it comes to privacy, when it comes to security, and that's something that needs to become a cultural phenomenon throughout our society.
Excellent. Thank you. Lorena, last word.
Thank you very much. I think that the key is in cooperation, in doing it together. I think it's the days where the government taking care of everything are gone now. It's impossible to deal with what we are facing, which is good, but has also its risk, can only be fixed by cooperation between governments, companies, and citizens. It's a joint exercise.
Thank you, Lorena. Thank you to all our panelists today, Lorena, Brando, David, Manuel, and Joachim. Also, thank you to Commissioner Vestager for taking time to be with us, and to Giga Europe for supporting the event. And for my team here at Euractiv, to Malta, Zoran, to Ross and Tamara, you don't see them, but I do, and it wouldn't happen without them. So wishing you all a very sunny, optimistically, day in Brussels eventually. Good afternoon.